Recruiting news on Calvin Russell, Jordan Campbell, Javian Mallory, Kamron Wilson, and more on the portal.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the portal your first listen each and every day to get all the recruiting scoop, information on the transfer portal, and NIL happenings right here on the portal. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Today's show is about Miami Under Armour, all the recruiting scoop, some player evaluations, and how important it is to do well with quarterback recruiting to help your class. So let's jump right in with the main guys that I interviewed, some players that I was curious about where their recruitments were trending. Let's start with Calvin Russell, and it is a very complex recruitment, but one that right off the bat, I'm going to mention this school quite a few times during this podcast, and I never thought it would be the one that I'd talk about after a Miami Under Armour, but the Syracuse Orange are really making waves in general. Calvin Russell is just one of them. Right now, as I look, I've got guys texting me. One of them is somebody with Syracuse who does a podcast, and they know that the Orange are in on a lot of people. It's incredible. Calvin Russell is one. First off, I just want to give his 12 schools out, and we'll discuss them in general because Calvin made it clear to multiple people that were standing there interviewing him that he wanted to make sure that he saw as many schools as possible in his top 12. He just dropped it on X, and he wanted to make sure that he gave out all the credit in the world to the people that were going through and giving all the attention to him that he could. So he's been respectful, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, you can only pick one school. So among them that he talked about with me and some of the other guys in particular that were just like on the top of his head were the following. He mentioned Bama, Auburn, Michigan, Syracuse, Miami. But again, he wants to get to all 12 of these schools. He said he even wants to take 12 OVs. I don't know if that's possible or not because he's going to wear himself out, but he really wants to be respectful. Syracuse is the school that comes up the most with him. Fran Brown is doing a tremendous job. Miami's after him and several other schools. Dereon Coleman's even trying to recruit him some. But Syracuse is the school I would watch. The 6'4", 6'5" guy, maybe 6'6", whatever. He's out of Miami Northwestern, one of the top receivers in the country, makes incredibly acrobatic catches. Like the very first play in one-on-ones to my side, they did it to both sides of the field. Right in front of me, he caught a jump ball in front of a guy. It was highly contested. That is what Calvin does. He can get you out of jams because of his athleticism and his length, and he's very competitive. Most guys that are built like him, he's a long, slender guy. He looks like a hooper, which he is as well. They don't have the ability to make those kind of plays, but he really does a great job. As for his complete list, let's just go down it. These are the 12 that he mentioned. Michigan, this is on his edit from Hayes Fawcett on X. Michigan, Miami, North Carolina, Auburn, Syracuse, Florida, Georgia, Oregon, LSU, Bama, Florida State, Southern Cal. He wants to try to get to all of those again, and some of them he hasn't been to before. I still think Syracuse and Miami are the most likely destinations, but we'll see. Auburn's, he said, went out of his way to say how hard Auburn's coming after him, just as an example. Florida's making a concerted effort. This is going to be a wild recruitment. He doesn't want to make a final decision until the very end. And he said, as good as he is, he put it point blank. He's like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but as good as I am, I should be able to pick my school at the end because I've earned it, basically. And I don't disagree with that. So this will be a National Signing Day deal for Calvin. I don't expect that to change. He really wants to give everybody a chance to recruit him and see how everything is. As for those that are curious, okay, what is it about Syracuse? Calvin made that very clear as well. And he said two words, Fran Brown. That's a name I keep hearing a lot. He's one of the best head coaches in college football when it comes to recruiting. He's a better football coach than a lot of people know too. Like what he did with Syracuse last year was incredible. But Fran and his staff make the kids feel welcome. I made a prediction on X at the Locked On Portal X handle I said 7 guys is my prediction for Florida this year. That would be one more than they got last year. But more importantly, I think they will take another step up in terms of their ability to get elite players. And it's not like Florida State, Miami are doing a poor job. Syracuse is just doing a really good job. So that's part of it. Now, after him, we still got plenty of other guys to talk about here. Let's get into the next one, and that's Javian Mallory, the running back from South Florida. Really good football player, great kid. He's been through a lot recently. You'll hear a story coming out from John Garcia Jr. at Rivals on that. He went through a tragedy that he got through, and it's amazing. So I'll let John report on that. But Mallory, great kid, looking at all these different schools. He's got Florida in a couple of weeks for an unofficial. He's going to Clemson this upcoming Friday. Doesn't have a date set yet, but he's probably going to visit Notre Dame. But the team that is clearly the one to beat would be the Miami Hurricanes. I don't know exactly all the dates, but I know he's supposed to go, I believe, today, and he might go to a few more visits there because, I mean, obviously Miami's right down the road, and Javion's a South Florida kid, but really good football player. He's built well, and watching him in drills on Sunday, he caught the ball well, he moves well. Everything you look for in an all-around back, Mallory can do. So I'm not surprised that he's got all these major programs coming after him. We'll see if he takes all these visits in addition to the University of Miami. I think this one is leaning heavily in that direction. So we'll see. Jordan Campbell. This one's more complex than I had originally thought. And this is why you do the interviews. Campbell's committed to Miami, and he, in his own words, for 2 years. It's roughly, I don't know what the exact date is, but it's roughly 2 years. And he said, all these schools are new to me. What does that mean? Who are they? Why? Well, based on the interview and the notes that I took, looking at his recruitment, it really is unique for him. But Jordan put in a few things to perspective here. Like with Florida, they've had a little bit of a coaching change here and there. He's got the new guy at linebacker that he's talking to, and he likes the new coaches. He wants to get up there, but he doesn't have a spring date yet with the Gators. He's going to visit, but he doesn't have a date. Far as OVs, the only one that he knows the date is the June 20th visit to the University of Miami. Again, he's a commitment. He's a Carroll City kid, so it's right down the road from him. But that's just the beginning of this. Florida State, he said he was on the phone with their general manager on Saturday. He really likes the FSU staff. Tim Harris is a South Florida guy. He said basically the whole staff is recruiting him. He mentioned Mike Norvell by name. He mentioned several other guys. He really likes the 3 in-state schools, and there are other options too. I thought Jordan Campbell's recruitment was pretty much over before this event. Now I'm not as sure. He needs to see Florida. He'll get up to Florida State again. He really likes how they're recruiting him. This one's much different than I thought. Every now and then there's a recruitment that I'm kind of caught off guard. Out of this event, I would say Campbell is the one that caught me the most out of place because I thought it was just UM, and he might give a courtesy visit here or there. But I really think he will take some looks around. Great kid, very mature, respectful to all the media. So shout out to him for representing himself and his family well. Jordan Campbell's a good dude. I think that this recruitment is going to play out a little longer, and he'll take at least a few OBs. Miami still should be considered the favorite. No question about that. But I think Jordan Campbell could end up at several different schools. Finally, kind of looking at this group, there's one other kid that I want to talk about. He's kind of on that cusp of players that they don't get enough attention yet, but specifically because of where he plays, and that's defensive end. His recruitment is going to heat up. He's a little raw yet, and he's still gaining weight, but he is the prototypical South Florida football player that a lot of guys come out this way, and they end up being really good down the road. He's got a frame to add more weight, and that is Kamron Wilson. Again, Kamron Wilson, Southridge High School, very good football player. Here are a few of the notes that he gave me in an interview after he got done. Minnesota, Syracuse, Florida State, and Cal or OVs. There's that school again, Syracuse. And it's just kind of wild that he's going to make so many different places a priority. He wants to, kind of like Jordan Campbell, kind of like Calvin Russell, he wants to see all these places. These South Florida kids haven't experienced a lot of different places. Minnesota, I highly doubt Kamron Wilson's ever been there. He's going to take an OV. He's going to go up to Florida State on March 20th, and his OV is June 20th. So he's got a set with the one in-state school. I don't think Miami's really in on him yet. I'll be curious to see if they do. USF, Tulane, Virginia Tech, among others. He said he's got a long list that are still trying to get OVs with him. Those are 3 that he mentioned. But this is not a surprise after what I kind of led with on this show. The best relationship that Kamron has is with Syracuse. Kamron Wilson, again, Southridge High School, defensive end. He's a kid that's on the rise. I really like his length. He's got ridiculously long arms, and he's got a frame that's going to weigh 240 real easy. He's at 210 right now, 6'4", 210. And he just plays hard. Very coachable in the drills and everything else. I'm telling you, this is a kid that his stock is going to go up. And he leaves the state. That's another guy that the big 3 allow to leave. Minnesota, Syracuse especially, and Cal. I mean, I doubt he goes to Cal, but you never know. He's taking an OV. They all have visits lined up in addition to the Knowles. Let's see who else gets an OV with him. Really like his upside. When we come back, we're going to talk about several more players, especially the receivers and DBs, which did not disappoint. It's South Florida, after all. That is next here on The Portal. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to directly support the players that you love. Now with Roy, you could make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes by representing the school that you love. With Roy, you get to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute to that player, get exclusive content straight from the athletes that you back. The best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and shape the future of Florida State or Miami or Syracuse or Michigan, whatever school that is you support, do it with Roy. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing your school and the athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading the Roy app and supporting your favorite players. All right, we got a lot of more players to get to, but one I just want to kind of give a shout out to before I go in to the quarterbacks here in a little bit. I want to talk about quarterback recruiting and how important it is and how wild the dramatic rise in Florida quarterback players. It's amazing how much better they are this year than any other year I've ever seen. It's not close. But Larry Miles, speaking of quarterbacks, he is the receiver for Dereon Coleman at Jones High School that gets nowhere near enough attention, and he just murdered people again this weekend. And I spoke to Dereon afterwards. I'll get into this a little more in about 10 minutes, but Larry Miles is a guy that is super athletic. He makes guys miss. He understands route running, the ability not only to make a guy miss because he's twitchy, but to change up his delivery on how he comes off the line, change up when he makes that, how fast, stop and starts, all of it. He mixes it up. Kind of think of an elite level pitcher when he throws his ace curveball, when he throws a high foul. Timing with everything matters. Larry Miles does that with his footwork. He is just really good. And I think he deserves to be a 4-star recruit across all the services. I know he's not a pure burner, catches everything, catches the ball away from himself. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Larry because I've seen him play enough. And I'm just like, why isn't he ranked higher? But that's just me. His recruitment is pretty wild. Louisville, Kentucky, Pittsburgh, and several other schools are trying to get him on campus. Those are some of the ones that will. Miami is one to watch out for. They're getting more heavily involved. That's a really good football player. Larry Miles, again, he's at Orlando Jones High School. And when you look down the list, and my gosh, it's quite a list of players that were on this turf in South Florida. The guy that impressed the most is one that didn't even need to be there. Maybe the best camp performer I've ever seen. You could at least make the argument is Jake Kreul. He's now at IMG. He was at Bishop Moore in Orlando before transferring to IMG. Jake Kreul is insanely good at one-on-one reps. I saw at least 8 off the top of my head. They had 2 different groups, and I was covering just one, and then they rotated them. So I don't know how many reps he got, and he even went inside and outside, and he's 6'3", 235. Again, Jake Kreul, IMG Academy. He just wins with technique more than anything else because he plays hard as all get out, but most of these kids play hard too. He even explained to me some of the moves, the hit and the pull by. He had a couple of guys that got him originally, but his secondary move is the best in the country. When his original move doesn't work, boom, there it is. He's down to about 10, 12 schools. He doesn't know where he's going. I talked about him the other day, but Oklahoma, Oregon, Tennessee, Florida State, Miami. There's all kinds of schools across the country, Penn State. He doesn't know where he's going. But if you want to watch a guy and learn how to pass rush, look up Jake Kreul. His last name is Kreul. Again, that's Kreul. Jake Kreul is a dude, and he just murdered the offensive lineman at this camp. Now, he was at the Thursday camp that IMG has. They have their own pro day that the Under Armour group goes to, Craig Harbert and all those guys, and they do a great job at all of them. So we thank you for that. But Kreul is just unbelievable with his technique. I don't know if I've ever seen a kid that maximizes it like he does, because, again, his effort is insane. He would take reps at D end, they'd switch guys out, and he'd go in at D tackle. Other guys that hide the back, Jake Kreul's out there competing. If you want to go up in the rankings, do what Jake Kreul does. That's how it's done. Next, Miami, Southridge. I talked about Kamron Wilson. I want to talk about the difference in, like, Jake is already technically sound. Kamron Wilson is a guy that wins with speed and can dip, and he's doing a few things. It just shows you how hard recruiting is. Like, Wilson, I think, can be just elite at some point. Will he get there? I don't know. I'm not going to project him to be as good as anybody, because you got to earn it. But that's why these camps are hard. I just talked about Kreul. He's an elite recruit. He's a national top 100 kid by anybody's measurement that's seen him play live. Wilson is really hard to evaluate because you're looking at projection. So defensive end, while it's a pivotal spot, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. The ability to bend, the ability to listen to coaching, accept it, which Wilson, by the way, is really good at. Those are some of the things you need to understand. As evaluators, there's a reason a kid who looks the part may not have the same ranking as somebody who's just more developed in terms of his technique. Kreul's got both, but there's a long way to go for Wilson. I'm really curious to see how that kid ends up going. Next up, let's talk about Brody Jennings out of Mandarin, the corner. He won MVP for the DBs, and he was really good. And I didn't realize how defined he was. He's a kid that's put together from top to bottom, really humble. He was happy that he won MVP and everything. I was taking photos of him. But that's a kid that his recruitment is probably going to blow up even more. Committed to Michigan, Florida State, legacy. He's got a lot of different schools coming after him. I think that his recruitment, don't be surprised, whoever you root for, if they offer him next, and or could be a scenario where they just really start coming after him. All these schools get the film in the Power Four, every single one of them, from Under Armour. And that is a really unique, or UC report, underclassmen report, what they call it. But they get this film. They're going to see what Brody did and several other guys. To that point, kid that I really liked was Devontae Anderson. He's out of West Orange in Orlando. He was at that Sevens tournament last weekend up in Atlanta with 24K. He ends up going down here, and I'm like, who is that? I'm just looking at numbers. I'm not trying to, because we're going through clips so fast. And I wrote it down, hey, like, this is going to need to look. No, it's Devontae. And I'm like, man, he's a lot better than I thought. He's starting to rise in recruiting rankings. Look for Devontae Anderson to end up being a guy that ends up with a bunch more offers too. I think he was really good. He's got good length, and he's got a lot of athleticism in the open field. He can make up speed or make up ground with his speed, because you're not always going to win reps. The South Florida, like receivers, I could do a show that's an hour long just on the receivers. Literally. It's gross. I mean, Calvin Russell gets a lot of attention. Larry Miles is getting more, et cetera. But there are a ton of 3- and 4-star guys in South Florida with a high upside. I could do a show literally an hour just on receivers. And I'll talk more about several positions as the week goes on. I just wanted to do an overview here today. Next up, speaking of, maybe the best move that I saw, it's debatable, but the best move off the line that really smoked somebody, Flanagan High School, another South Florida program, Santana Carlos. Not the biggest guy in the world, but holy moly, is he twitchy. He turned the guy completely over to the side. Like, he had no idea where he was, and he just kind of jogged to the corner on a fade route and caught the ball. Nice. I don't remember who threw it, but perfect pass. He beat the guy by 5 yards off the line. Like, literally. It's rare with the DB level that there is in South Florida. It was a great DB group too. Santana Carlos is a dude. He made several guys look bad during the day, but that one in particular was sick. I got it on my YouTube shorts. Another guy that's a receiver, he doesn't get enough discussion. Maybe it's because he's committed already. He's been committed to Auburn for a long time. Is Denarius Gray, route runner, length, size, hands, catches the ball away from his body. He will mix up his routes too, like Larry Miles and some of these guys. He's technically more advanced than most receivers, South Florida or otherwise. Denarius Gray is really freaking good. He needs to be ranked in the top 100, in my opinion, nationally, but that's just me. I've seen him several times. I really like him. One last guy here that I want to talk about in terms of a receiver. I had no idea who he was, and he reclassed and went up. So he was a freshman this past year. He should have been in 8th grade. He had roughly 1,000 yards, I was told, at Mandarin. Teams were double teaming Jamie French. I get it. He signed with Texas. Bryson Wright is ridiculous. He's a big-bodied kid already. Looks like he's a senior in high school, and he should be going into his 9th grade year. He will be the next super elite receiver in the state of Florida. He's at Mandarin. Again, Bryson Wright, BRYSENWRIGHT, Bryson Wright. That is a dude. He will be a 50 offer kid, period, no doubt. It's not even in question. Hands, route running, all that. He takes his craft seriously. I didn't speak with the young man, but I spoke with several people that have seen him, playoffs, etc. And they're like, he's the real deal. And I even got a few clips from a buddy of mine, like at a 7-on tournament. He's beating high-level kids that are 3 years older than him pretty easily. That is a guy that is going to be super, super elite. One last guy to talk about before we get into the quarterbacks in the last segment, and there were several other defensive linemen, but I just want to mention because it's hard to find D tackles. Jamar Thompson. This is a kid out of West Boca. He was a dominant player in the one-on-ones. I got a bunch of them, and I'm going to post literally about 100 shorts over the next week from this event. I'm not exaggerating. Jamar Thompson's one of those guys I've already posted. You can check it out on the Portal Podcast YouTube page. Just go to Google and type in the Portal Podcast Recruiting. If you don't put the recruiting in, there's another podcast that's similar. But again, the Portal Podcast Recruiting on Google, it'll pop up. Jamar Thompson is a guy, like when he walks out there, you're like, okay, who is that? 6'2", 6'3", 290, maybe 295. He's got hands, he's got lateral quickness, and he can move. He's only going to be a junior, but I think he's by far, as far as upside, the best defensive tackle in the South Florida area for a long-term recruitment point of view. And Thompson is also a guy that plays hard. A lot of these D tackles that know they can run over people, they don't give max effort. Thompson loved it. He liked the reps. He liked the competition. That's something I look at. If you're not coming with 100% effort, and I mean, these camps cost a gazillion dollars. I mean, they got cameras everywhere. They got reporters. We got 40, 50 people they're reporting. We got some kids loafing. I don't go into the names, but some of these kids loaf. This kid was not one of them. And he knew he was the guy that everybody's kind of watching at D tackle. He was one of them, that it looks a little different, has a little bit different size. Good for him. I'm curious to see where he goes. I don't know much about his recruitment yet, but that is a really good football player. When we come back, we're going to talk about quarterback recruiting, some interesting conversation that I had with a certain Miami quarterback commitment, and some other news too. That's next here on the Portal. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. For example, if you want to live bet something like a player's really hot in an NBA basketball game, you want to go in and say, okay, I didn't bet on this game earlier, but this guy's really rolling. I want to bet him over on 30 points. You can absolutely do that. That's up to you. You can make that happen. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback, what happens? You lose. Quarterback recruiting, fortunately for all of us that cover the state of Florida, is on a major, major upswing. I'm just going to mention 4. There were other guys there that were good, but there are 4 guys, one ironically from Illinois that's an underclassman. All of these guys are helping their program wherever they end up signing because they're noticeable in how they throw the ball, how direct they are, their frames, all of it fit what it's supposed to look like. There's no order here, But well, I'll go with Dereon first. They gave him MVP, so I'll give him the nod. Dereon Coleman, Jones High School in Orlando. I love his ability to throw off platform. He has one of the most wicked, quick throwing motions that I've ever seen for a high school kid. He's got some moxie to him. He knows he's good. He's put time in on his body. He still needs to gain weight. Absolutely. He's 6'1", 190 pounds or something like that after year 2 of college would be my guess. But right now he's 165. I maybe got up to 170. When I talked to him about a month or so ago, he was $165. Committed to Miami, but there's a reason Miami's going to have an easier time recruiting receivers. You watch Dereon's film or see him live like I have, it's not hard. And he's doing his due diligence to recruit other guys. Again, he won MVP. Dereon Coleman won MVP at Miami Under Armour for the quarterback position, and he earned it. I didn't even watch him for more than about 5-10 throws because it's mundane to me anymore. For most people, I've been fortunate to see him play probably half dozen times, but it's insane how athletic he is and the way he rolls out and still puts it on the money, stationary in the pocket, step up, slide, whatever you do. If you don't get guys that are really good at quarterback, you have no chance to win a national title. To that point, he made a point that he is trying to get Calvin Russell to Miami. He made it a point to say he's trying to get his high school teammate, again, Larry Miles from Orlando Jones, to come with him to Miami, and he is directly involved with it. Dereon Coleman wants to win. He's a leader, he's a competitor, and he's a guy that really doesn't take no for an answer. I love that attitude, and he's a guy that I will always respect. Will Griffin, I've seen Will play a gazillion times too, probably even more than Dereon, because I used to live in Tampa, and he's at Jesuit in Tampa, Florida. But Will looks the part. He's 6'3", 230. He is yoked. He's always been a guy that's had a huge arm. My only question with him was sometimes he could probably take something off a little bit more often. I'm trying to find something here because there's really not a lot to pick on. But Sunday, he looked like he was even more comfortable than normal. I don't know why that was. There were a few throws that were shorter, check downs and short routes to the flat. And not only was he accurate, he gave his guy a really easy throw to make it work. It didn't matter if it was a running back, if it was a receiver, tight end, whatever. He just looked more comfortable with his shorter throws. He's trying to help kids end up at Florida. He's a guy that is really likable and is easygoing and humble. Will Griffin is a great kid. I hope him and everybody else that goes to UF understands like this is not normal to have a quarterback with his physical traits. I think he could be really good for the Gators down the road. I don't know who they're going to get, but I know there's still, there's a lot of questions about Billy and his staff, but Griffin is locked in with the Gators, and he's going to help them get some players. There's questions about Bell coming back from his injury because he got hurt in the playoff last year. Dia looked good. Bell is an American heritage. He's committed to the University of Texas. Again, Bell, I didn't know what he'd really looked like because I hadn't seen him except for a few clips on social media, and Dia looked fine to me. I can see why Texas fans should be excited, and they've obviously got some really good receivers in this last class. They killed it, but he will also help. Dia 6'3", he's a little over 200 pounds, and he can move a lot better than people think. Just want to bring that up. It's not always just about being on time and in rhythm. Sark's offense obviously does a tremendous job with the quarterback position, but I think Dia is going to make himself a little bit more of a mobile quarterback than what he's been given credit for. Watching him move around at Under Armour reminded me of that. I've seen him in practice. I've seen him in game. I've seen him at camps. I've seen him all kinds of stuff, but 7-on-7. But yesterday was just a reassurance because he's coming off a pretty awful leg injury from last season. He's already ready to roll. So good for him for getting back to it, being confident in himself and competing. Some kids wouldn't do that if they had the Texas offer and the commitment. He recently got Georgia and some others too, but he's locked in with the Horns. I'm really curious to see who the Horns end up signing with Bell in place as their quarterback recruit. I think that's a really good fit for the way his mentality works with Sarkisian. That ought to work out pretty well for the Horns. Lastly, I just want to say, again, the Miami Under Armour camp was massive. I could have done an hour just on receivers. So I kind of just hit on a couple. I'm going to come back around, do some positional things, talk about more kids. And if nothing else, I'm telling you, by the end of the week, I'll probably have about 100 shorts up on YouTube. Just go to Google and type in the Portal Podcast Recruiting, the Portal Podcast Recruiting. You'll find the YouTube page and Receiver DB. There'll be a little bit in terms of the 40s and stuff like that. I'll have some of the testing stuff. And I didn't even touch on maybe the best player in Florida that's there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on at this camp. So a half-hour show, I just don't have enough time to do it. But it's really, really fun. I'm curious to see how it goes. And I think that you're going to enjoy it because I have a lot more recruiting scoop and evaluations to talk about here on the portal. So like and subscribe. Make sure you share this podcast. And I will see you again soon here on the portal.